Star Wars directors and filmmakers can try to convince me all they want that Imperials rise through the ranks simply by political gain and by unharnessed skill. However, I know the true reason, and that is scariness. Because this guy merely gets a position of director. Do you know who else is a director and is equally as scary and formidable looking?
Shall the carnage continue? Holidays are over, people! Way over!
And then there's Grand Admiral Thrawn, who with his blue skin in this highly racist, all-basic Imperial club, is pretty terrifying with his calm and quiet and calculating demeanor and those red, glowing eyes. Of course, you go up another step, and you got Grand Moff Tarkin, who, as we know, Peter Cushing's cheekbones could literally cut glass. So, yeah, he looks like he belongs in a horror movie or something. And you'd think it would top off with the space wizard running around with a red laser sword and the faulty breathing apparatus all dressed in black, but it doesn't, and for good reason. See, if you want to champion the entire Empire, you've got to look like the hybrid son of Swamp Thing left out in the desert for a long period of time, as well as with some kooky Washington teeth. This is why you don't go sticking forks in outlets, kids. Electricity will do this to you. Taking place after Star Wars Rebels and very shortly before Star Wars A New Hope, we are treated to the wonderful story of why the Death Star had a self-destruct button of sorts.
Thank you for pressing the self-destruct button. This ship will self-destruct in 3 minutes.
One thing I can say that I couldn't say about the previous prequels, because yes, technically speaking, this is, and Solo was as well, a prequel to the original films that's just not part of the prequels. But anyway, the fact of the matter is that Rogue One not only accomplishes the formidable task of being a great Star Wars movie, but by also taking on the task of bettering the original movies, namely A New Hope, knowing the sacrifice and the heroism and the previously untold bravery and stories of these characters that we get to go along with, whether it be Galen Erso, Jyn Erso, the rest of the Rogue One squadron, or even Saw Gerrera. Like, we get so many different perspectives of this war that we previously haven't gotten in Star Wars. And it makes A New Hope, especially because they don't make it to the movie, all the more rewarding. But the Death Star self-destruct button has always sort of been like a question mark in my mind. It's not enough where I had less enjoyability of the original trilogy or A New Hope, but it's always raised an eyebrow or two whenever I tried to give it too much thought. This definitely makes it a wholer story and something that, and how they recovered the Death Star plans, all the cooler. Now we just need the story of those many Bothans that lost their lives in Return of the Jedi. It just feels like when you watch A New Hope after watching Rogue One, that you're not just watching the original gang and the beloved characters that we've loved for so many years and their new spark and entry into the rebellion, especially Luke or Han, but we're also rooting for all these other characters that laid down their lives and gave the rebellion a fighting chance. So many people, like from beginning to end of this movie, people are dying just to get these plans in Leia's hand. And when Leia delivers that line of hope, it hits so hard because it really is the New Hope. And Leia's reigning of this being hope does ring bittersweet because so many people died for it. But we know they didn't die in vain because we know what comes next war, but it's actually a chance for the rebels to take on the Empire. And not only that, but I really think that this is the only Star Wars movie still to date that actually has elements that feel like war in it. And I'm not saying that as a negative or a slight to the other movies. I think that those were much more personalized tales because previously we've sort of followed this narrative, and continuously with Rey and the sequel trilogy, we've followed our main characters as they do these big stunts for the rebellion and they're not quite on the front lines of the battlefield. Like, this is some guerrilla warfare fighting on the ground, in the forest, on the oceans, and the beautiful French Maldives, mind you. And there's espionage, moral ambiguity on both sides, mind you. And there's just this level of brotherhood in arms that, again, we haven't had previously. And that's because our main characters in this story are actually on the front lines of battle throughout the entire story. Like, this movie does not give you a break when it comes to action very often. And it works because we still get to know our characters, and it still feels like a personalized journey, as the stories with Anakin, Luke, and now Rey have felt like personalized stories. We know a war is going on. We know that the Jedi and the clones are fighting the Clone Wars outside of just what we've seen in the TV show, of course. But we also know that Luke and the Rebels are fighting, even though you may not see Luke fighting alongside the Rebels as much. And now in the current trilogy, we know the Resistance is all fighting the front lines as well, but we're more along seeing Rey and their direct actions and how they have consequences on these bigger battalions and leaders and everything like that. Whereas with the Rogue One Squadron, they are those pockets of people that are fighting and laying down their lives for something they believe in. And they all have their various reasons for doing so. And I think that was important too, that they really lay down the explanations for everybody and how everybody definitely has a purpose in this movie. I never once felt like any of the characters or performances felt stale, or especially in the Rogue One team, everybody fits very well, you know? Jyn is a very compelling and complicated main character, and Felicity Jones plays the rogue, no pun intended, gone rebel very well. Cassian has that level of moral ambiguity, but he's also somehow the guiding light in there, because he's a good example of how just because it's the rebels doesn't mean that they're not prone to doing bad things to get to do what they need to do, and that's shown in the beginning of the movie. And then, of course, Baze and Chirrut, they show this beautiful friendship that we've not really seen, like, it's so established in Star Wars. And we see this wonderful relationship between them and this established new meaning of the Force, of course, as well. And then there's Bodhi, and Bodhi is a perfect example of redemption. K2 is more than just perfectly timed, witty sense of humor.
Did you know that wasn't me?
His demise is probably the one that made me the saddest, to be honest. One thing that becomes remarkably clear about this movie is that, yes, it is about getting the Death Star plans, but it's also so tremendously based on trust and the importance of that. Jyn learns very quickly what it means to need to be trusted when she is the only one who has the Death Star plans or knows that they exist and the importance of them because of her father's message to her. But she learns to trust the rest of the team and to be a part of something and to be trusted. And Cassian, he develops a trust too. We see from the beginning he doesn't trust Jyn at all, and he barely trusts anyone but himself and K2, because of his own actions and what he's seen firsthand on the battlefield. But he develops this trust over time. He literally is leaning on Jyn in the end, both physically and metaphorically, letting her support him. And this is somebody that he didn't want to give a gun at the beginning of the movie. Chirrut and Baze have trusted each other throughout the entire movie. However, Baze develops a trust in the Force in the end, based on his friend's wisdom and to honor him as well. And that does help them complete their mission. Bodhi learns what it means to be trusted as well, and to feel that, because he is given one of the most important parts of the mission in being their ride home, and when that doesn't work out, he has to literally make sure that the transmission goes through so that nothing that they did was in vain. And K2, he gets given a gun by Jyn and gives his own sentiment and gets to finally do his own send-off, and again learns to trust everyone himself. Even though he's a droid, he could still have the emotional arc these others are having. But what are heroes when villains are proposed? Your heroes are nothing without a good, strong, formidable foe. And just because Krennic loses on the scary front, and because he disobeys the most important rule given to man,
no kicks,
and because he's stacked against Tarkin, who could freeze a volcano with his stare, whether it be in CGI or regular form. Side note, I like CGI Tarkin. I think that they did a very respectful and amazing job with the technology that they had in 2016. I think if Tarkin wasn't in this story, it would have felt off. And I think their Leia impression did very well as well. But Krennic, nah. He's really not meant to be scary when you've got cheekbones over here and then you've got Darth Pun Master Vader.
Be careful not to choke on your aspirations, Director.
He's meant to be that bitchy bureaucrat that's really pissed and is an underling and isn't getting the credit that he thinks he deserves and thinks he's way more important than anyone else, and that he's got this rivalry with Tarkin and he's just sort of like the little brother that's getting his head held and swinging his arms while Tarkin's like, "You may fire when ready." And he's just not as big and bad as he thinks he is, especially with the cape that he wears that's swirling around in the wind and everything like that. But Krennic is still a sniveling and formidable foe for what we have, because it just goes to show that the underlings of the Empire can be just as bad and aware of their actions and what they're doing that's so evil to the rest of the galaxy. He doesn't care that he's constructing this death machine the Empire would be able to use on anyone, including himself. He just wants the accolades and the glory. That's what all this guy's motivation is. And he's not even the one really doing it. He's forcing Galen to do it the entire time. But that just goes to show that politicians can be weasels. And do I think one of our US politicians, or a handful of our US politicians for that matter, would do something like this if possible? I'm not saying that. But I'm not saying that. It's only fitting that we get someone who's like the underling to be our main villain here. Because if you think about it, the Rogue One squadron shouldn't have been a big deal to the Empire. They should have been a little bug that they had to squish. However, they created a big blast, which just goes to show you shouldn't underestimate someone by their size. And the same goes for Krennic, because he is mostly responsible for this gigantic Death Star, who Tarkin considered to be a failure the entire time. Of course, no movie is perfect. Every movie has their moments, and for me, one of the big moments of this one is when Muck comes out to torture Bodhi. You know what scene I'm talking about.
Poor Gullet can feel your thoughts.
It just doesn't fit in with the rest of the movie. I don't know. I think that it was in here to show off what kind of technological sense they could do, but they already showed that with Tarkin and with Leia. I mean, honestly, just funnel all your funds into doing something like that. I don't need to see this gigantic jelly glob attacking and making out with Bodhi non-consensually. And then to piece on top of that, Saw Gerrera, as much as Forrest Whitaker kills his role and how great of an actor he really is, his role is so confusing in this movie. He kind of is like this confused old man when they show up to see him and everything, and he's like, "You're trying to kill me?" And it's like, you think he's gonna flip on a dime constantly, and he's very unstable, which I think kind of works, but he goes so quick and so soon that I don't think he quite makes the impact you think he does, because you kind of spend the whole time being like, is he bad? Is he good? Like, what are we doing here? And they clear things up a little bit in Rebels, because Saw Gerrera is just such an extremist after what happened to his sister in the Clone Wars series. How his eye color changed, I'm not sure. Obviously, we're given the greatest Darth Vader scene known to man. It feels like we've unlocked Prime Vader after so many years of being fans, you know? Because obviously, Revenge of the Sith, we were kind of hoping for this, but instead we got... And then in A New Hope, yeah, his lightsaber stuff is not... It's not on Prime. Empire, he has a really solid, formidable fight. But he didn't really want to be slicing through his son entirely, because he had some family stuff to deal with. In Return of the Jedi, he does have an awesome fight. He's a little dusty. But again, the family stuff's kind of harboring on his mind, and we still get... But on top of just the sheer badassery of Vader going medieval and all these rebels and them running away and frantically slipping the plans on the floppy disk through the slots, it makes the scene in A New Hope so much funnier. Because here we have Leia's very obvious Tantive 4 ship and her rebels, the people on the ship, running to her with the physical plans in their hands, presumably handing it off to Leia, who is aboard the ship. And Vader, who's physically chasing them, and up until the end where he's like got his silvery pants and his cape, which looks way cooler on Vader. And he's just like staring and seething for him to catch up to her in A New Hope. For her to have said, "What is this, Leia? Hope." And then for him to catch up to her and for her to be like,
I don't know what you're talking about.
baller move. And she's totally Anakin Skywalker's kid. And I love the cameos and the other nods in this movie, of course, too. Bail Organa is one that really shines bright, and when you mentioned Obi-Wan and Leia, this is obviously before they show Leia in the end. I love that so much. That's such a great thing. And Jimmy Schmitz looks great. And then we had the same Mothma from the deleted Revenge of the Sith scene, which is awesome and such good detail. Good job, Disney. Good job on that one. The R2-D2 and C-3PO little cameo slip-in felt justified. Now Solo is the only Star Wars movie without 3PO and R2 in it, and that makes me really sad. Hera Syndulla from Rebels. Her name is announced over the intercom, and you do see the ghost ship at one point during Rogue One, implying she was fighting in Rogue One. And of course, Saul Guerrera's transformation from animation to live action sphere is great too. I think they need to do more of that stuff, you know, make everything more cohesive, put it all together, which this movie does a great job with A New Hope, because it really does take you up until like 30 seconds before A New Hope starts. So what did you guys think of Rogue One, A Star Wars Story? Are you excited for its sequel? I really hope they destroy this Death Star thing. May the Force be with you, and you guys have a great day.
Is that clear?
Yes, sir.